Well, that was a fascinating presentation. I have to think I know myself and some others in the room here who were at Ground Zero on November 24th, 2014. You know, seeing that slide up there with the interview poster on it brings back some memories of a very interesting year. So our next segment is an enterprise panel, and we have Bentley Au, who is Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at AEG Worldwide. Ernie Liu, who's the Head of Information Security at United Talent Agency. Jeff Blair, who's Head of Security at Creative Artists Agency. And Mark Van Holsbeck, who's CISO of Avery, Dennison. The panel will be moderated by Danny Lee, who's the Chief Security Partner, Security Practice Partner at KPMG. So I'd like to invite our moderator and panelists to please come up.
Thanks, Andy, and everyone for having us here today. This is a great community. I love attending these events because, you know, this is a community of people that work together in LA, and we've got a lot of relationships over the years. I've known many of the panelists already outside of this forum, so it's great to kind of get us all together here. For the discussion today, we started the session, the event, talking about innovate at UCLA, right? So this whole idea of digital business and where we were and where we're going. And with regards to cyber, cyber has to make that journey along with IT also. We also have to transform. So today we have, actually while I was sitting here pulling together our agenda, we look at notes and people's background, and everybody says, you know, I have 20 years, I have 40 years of experience. And I was going to add that up, but I think the numbers got kind of large, so we're not going to talk about those numbers. But there's a lot of experience here. And each of these CISOs have gone through that journey of moving from the, if you will, on-prem to the in-the-cloud kind of scenario, right? And so really the main question that we're starting off here is, you know, when you're moving or transforming IT and changing your security architecture, your security processes, are the principles still the same? I mean, we're really using different technologies, different tools in a whole completely different environment, but does the logic actually still exist, or do you actually have to change the entire logic of cybersecurity? And so we're going to look at that on three particular frontiers. First is sort of the core infrastructure, if you will, back of the house, building the platform, if you will, for the enterprise, right? What has changed there? And then the second question is going to be product and service delivery to the customers, the clients, and so forth. And when you're out there distributing either to B2B, B2C, direct to consumer, how does that change? What do you have to do there for cybersecurity? And then lastly, the last question is going back to the core of the development process, SDLC, engineering, all of those things. Is there a security by design philosophy out there? What are the practices? Right, so those are the three areas we're going to cover today. So first and foremost, I'll start off with the first question, and I'll just go this way for now, and then we'll switch the other way as we go. But Ernie, so the first question is really, and I'll share this with the group here, as your, congratulations on your new role here, right? And
thank you.
Give a little intro about yourself as you speak. How do you deal with infrastructure, back office, building security into that infrastructure? What kind of tools are you dealing with? What kind of services you're offering to the enterprise users, right? So back office, enterprise infrastructure. I'll start there.
Sure. So good morning, Ernie Liu with United Talent. Prior to here, I was a incident response consultant for a long time. So I've seen in real life what works and what doesn't work. And going back to your original question, do the principles still hold in terms of moving from an on-prem based environment to cloud-based and on-prem, we used to refer to it as like a watermelon, right? It's hard on the inside, but once you get hard on the outside, but once you get past that, it's soft and mushy and delicious on the inside, and you can move about freely. But in many ways, those principles are the same. Those security principles of authentication and authorization. But what's changed is kind of the pivot around it. Whereas in the old days of the high castle walls, your security is based mostly on your location, basically your IP. If you're inside the castle walls, then you're okay and you can move about. But now with cloud services, perimeter security is not going anywhere, right? But with cloud services, with each cloud service can be considered its own castle. And now that is, if leveraged correctly, each of those cloud services, along with a centralized identity platform, can be an additional sensor for you and an additional enforcement point for you. So they can really work in tandem to build that story around identity. It's no longer about IP or system that you're coming from. It's about identity, and we can go into examples of that. But what does a user look like? What should they look like? And what looks normal?
Great, thanks, Amy. Jeff?
Yeah, so Jeff Blair, CISO for Creative Artists Agency. And yeah, agree with a lot of things that Ernie's talking about. So we started kind of on this cloud migration really 6 years ago, and knew at that time that, fundamentals were still critically important. Patch management, vulnerability management, incident response, those things that we are going to do ourselves and that we are still going to be responsible for going forward. But we knew kind of in this cloud accountability model that we were going to shift some of the accountability to our service providers, and a lot more kind of on the SaaS side versus the PaaS infrastructure as a service. And we knew that there was a continuum there that we had to map to. And one of the kind of the three core pieces of that were establishing a really strong identity management platform and identity management capability. That was going to be our new perimeter. We have to know who you are, where you're coming from, the context of your devices, the context of your access. Be able to do that and prove that over time so that we are able to say, yes, you are who you are in that system. Because we knew the Microsofts of the world, the Amazons of the world, the Googles of the world weren't going to do that for us. They were going to keep their platform secure. The other thing that we knew we had to do, we were going to take anywhere we couldn't put our traditional preventative controls in place, we had to make cloud detection controls available. Right. So what that means is making sure that we had these abilities to understand user behavior and understand when that was going to change over time. That was not something the cloud providers were going to do for us in a proactive manner. They are going to allow whatever access to the mailbox, whatever downloads, everything across those services. We have to know what's normal. We have to set what's baseline. The other piece was when we see something going wrong, we have to be able to react quickly. So before, we relied a lot on these preventative controls. We were just blocking things. We didn't have that ability, and we knew it was going to go away. So, okay, incident response. We have automation capabilities. We have the ability to go out and remove access from all these systems in a coordinated manner quickly that doesn't rely on a lot of people process in order to accomplish.
Thank you. All right, Bentley, I know when you and I spoke, you probably have one of the most dramatic shifts of all the CISOs here recently, coming from Toyota and now to AES, entertainment and automotive, right? We spoke about that earlier in that transition. So maybe share with us your thought on what that meant from a CISO perspective.
Yeah, so I think one of the things to remember, and I think kind of Jeff covered it as well, is you still got to do the same things. Security doesn't really fundamentally change. What changes is the technology, the tools you use, right? So we're using different tools to get stuff done as an organization to make money. So your tools change, our tools change. So really the fundamentals of what are you trying to protect, what's the value of what you're trying to protect, and how much do you want to spend to protect it, you still have to make those decisions. So you don't with this really as a new form of outsourcing. You don't really outsource the responsibility. You're just outsourcing the technology. And what it's allowed us to do, and I think what it allows anybody to do, is to not have to focus so much on the nitty-gritty technology, because the service providers are doing it for you. They're not going to tell you how to do it. They're going to do things for you. You still got to figure out, to Jeff's point, you still got to do the incident response. You may not have to use all the tools. The tools may be automated. They may be easier to use for you, so you don't have to have as much technical know-how of that. But you still have to know the process of responding to an incident. You still have to know how to identify whether this is an incident that is important to you or not important to you. So all of those things have, in our case and in my opinion, become easier, because now we can start focusing on those things and in a sense move the thought process or move our efforts up sort of the value chain, and that's getting closer to what the business cares about, as opposed to going into a boardroom and telling them that, you know, we've done this patch and we're doing these patches, right? That stuff has become, it's being done for you, right? That's one of the advantages I had, I think, coming into AEG, is that that path was already set. They were already moving towards the cloud, and just within the last couple of years, it's been, I'd say, accelerated to where we're going to a zero data center. And so when we don't have that data center to worry about, my team can focus on the things that are, I'd say, more important or closer to what the business wants, and that's how do we solve the security problem and enable the business to do more.
Great. Mark?
So I didn't come from Toyota. So at Avery, we've definitely pushed towards a cloud-first initiative that's been going on for many years. And we've got about 90 apps that are in the cloud today, knowing that we've pushed our security infrastructure in that direction as well. So our cloud proxy, cloud authentication and multi-factor authentication, and other parts of our aspects of our security infrastructure are out there, intentionally knowing our employees are going to be out there as well. Or with acquisitions, it makes it very simple just to turn them on. So that's definitely the direction we're going and pursuing. And I'll go on to what Jeff said. Yeah, authentication is definitely one of the big areas for us, as well as data and context of that data. So those are the two things that we've really pushed hard on, like a CASB is another example of that architecture. So we're able to watch how people use data in the cloud. And we're different than I think some of the other panelists. Our version of cloud is SaaS. We buy SaaS and SaaS only. There's very little like IaaS kind of infrastructure in our world.
Great. Jeff, you know, when we talked, you talked a lot about behavioral analysis as a part of kind of your view on cybersecurity. Can you kind of explore that a little bit more? I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, so kind of building on what Mark was saying, it is that contextual analysis around data, around access, for us to understand, and it's a path. The tools are still kind of getting better. We're getting better understanding around our data and usage patterns. But it's been really important for us to leverage these tools to understand in context when somebody has accessed the network from a device we've never seen before, from an area they aren't physically located in. Cloud makes some of that difficult because people appear to be in places where they're not. They appear to be coming from devices that we don't know of. And then we have integrated that into our incident response process and our multi-factor authentication capabilities to really put onus on the end user as well, to help them without overburdening them. Because one thing we've seen, multi-factor has been a huge help in addressing the issue with password and credential stuffing and password reuse. But one thing we are seeing is that people are becoming, there's multi-factor fatigue. So right. If you are stepping up people too often, they will step up without thinking about it. Right. And that's become, kind of an issue around the multi-factor side. So what we use is kind of this behavior analytics and context analytics in order to present people with the step-up prompts at the right times when we feel that there's a significant risk it's not truly them. So that's kind of the biggest area we put it in. The other is on the detection side for our analysts, understanding if something is going wrong with the user from a behavior side. Have they downloaded data they've never accessed before? Have they downloaded more data? And being able to instrument across all of our platforms and has been key for that.
And that's really, again, part of weaving the story of the user. So in Jeff's example, he mentioned a user is logged in from somewhere that they've never logged in before. Well, maybe they're on vacation. Do we need to bother that user? Well, let's take a look at the story. What happened before that, and what happened after that? Okay, well, we see that the user is also logged in at their desk. Okay, well, that's probably a bad sign, right? Or we can see, okay, the user's logged in from somewhere we've never seen before, and now they're downloading or they're syncing a large file share, a cloud file share. That's probably a bad sign. And it's building that context. And today, it is a challenge trying to understand that story and get that automated. Right now, our automation process is just weaving that story together, but it still takes a human to ultimately evaluate these corner cases, right? The other thing Jeff mentioned is MFA. I cannot stress enough, if the transition to the cloud is desired, it cannot be done without MFA. It is
It all starts with identity, right? And you have to get that right. And we've seen or saw a dramatic improvement in our capabilities when we implemented MFA. It really lifted a huge burden off of my ops team to not have to deal with investigating what happened when somebody got compromised, because we were getting them regularly.
Yep.
And then when MFA started, it stopped. So now allows us to focus on other things. The challenge with that is now everybody steps up their game, right? So we stepped up our game. The hackers can't use the same old techniques, so now they got to use, hopefully they go away, but they don't, right? They'll come back and they'll do stuff that the FBI was talking about, and they step up their game. So now we got to go focus on those things.
Well, one of the things, Bentley, you mentioned when we talked was this concept of like for like. You know, if you're on-prem, you use on-prem solutions. If you're in the cloud, you start to look for cloud-native solutions because they're more matched. Can you kind of share with us some of your experience in that comparison?
Yeah, so it goes a little bit back to the comment on, the tools change, but the fundamentals don't. And so when you're on-prem and you've got a big data center, which everybody used to have, you're using on-prem tools. You have to. There wasn't no cloud solution. And then as we started, even in my previous gig, even as we started to move to the cloud, our philosophy was use the cloud to protect the cloud. And so, because it's really hard to use on-prem systems to protect a cloud-based solution. And to a certain extent, vice versa. There's certainly some crossover there. But you really do have to learn how to leverage what is next to the stuff you're trying to protect. Ultimately, and I think the panel will agree, and we're talking about the identity piece. Really what we care about is not the device, we care about the data. And so as we start to get better as an industry, the security industry, at protecting data wherever it goes, then we can stop caring about the device. We spend a lot of effort, everybody spends a lot of effort on keeping devices up to date. And really we're protecting the device, not the data, right? Yeah. So there's protecting the people and what they're using, which is the data.
Well, that's a good one for you to comment on, Mark, because when you and I talked, you have everybody has a global view, but when we talked, you really had a global view of how you're going to address this across worldwide users. So maybe, in terms of not just device dependent, but location and context.
Yeah, and let me jump on what you said. Totally agree, the device is not where we want it in the long term, but we know that's where it is now. That's where we have our tools, we have a lot of experience, and that's where a lot of activity is still happening, right? So we still have to do it, you all still have to do it, but we, obviously as the cloud tools become more mature, we're going to move towards watching data and stop watching the endpoint. I want to get like Google, I don't care about the endpoint, just don't care, but we're not there yet, right? Many of us have older environments, brick and mortar systems, and we have these legacy systems we still have to protect, and we're stuck with it, right? So we all want to go towards a more mature environment. And See, I'm not sure I remember exactly where you're leading to. Can you give me another bite of that?
Well, you know, we talked about delivering security into countries like China and how you're looking at SaaS services and, you know, so that what do you do to address that? How do you deal with the fact that your executives, your business process, your supply chain is very much a global one, and you're dealing with tools and technologies that may not exist in certain markets,
True.
right?
Yeah, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, is, you know, our tool base now is mostly in the cloud as much as it can get there, and knowing it has to be enterprise solution, it can't be a localized national solution. So all the providers we look at certainly have to have a presence or field services or some capabilities that are globally based. And I think that's the only way you can go in at least an international company. Sorry.
Just want to build on something that Bentley was talking about that we haven't really touched on too much. Kind of when data and kind of users are your perimeter, the access piece, it also means that we have to transition to more accountability on the user side. We've kind of wrapped the user when they were in the office and kind of within our systems to say, okay, you're protected, you're safe here, don't worry about it, we've got you. But now when users have so much more choice and so much more ability to move data between systems around cloud, there has to be this increase in user awareness capabilities and a real focus on not just kind of phishing training, but understanding what their behavior is
And
around data,
accountability, right?
and a real accountability model to say, you know, it doesn't have to be incredibly draconian, but there has to be a point in time where people are responsible for their data, and it's not just a tech problem.
So if you send documents to your personal account at home so that you can download it and print it at home too often, maybe your HR performance manager needs to know about that, because that's probably not good practice, right?
Yeah, but being aware and kind of at the time, and systems aren't quite there today, we can do this through some of our behavior analysis.
Right.
Hey, we saw you downloaded these documents to your home.
Yeah.
We suggest these other ways of doing it because it is safer.
Right.
Instead of getting a call from HR saying, hey, you downloaded this to home, let's
Well, that's-
let's address this in your
Just-in-time-
performance review.
And just-in-time education.
Yeah.
A lot of the role is protecting the user from themselves,
Yep.
right? And building in that security where you can give them those options where you can say, hey, we noticed you download or you forward these things to yourself, but you have to we need to be able to present an option.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, you can't just say no because it disappears, it goes down.
Well,
Yeah.
let me see if I can shift that user community to the other one, which is actually very important, and that's the one that's actually paying, right? The customer community or the client community. And as we talk about the transition of on-prem to cloud in the enterprise serving your internal customers, how are you helping drive the cyber agenda for your entire business as you serve the market, the consumers that you're dealing with? Because there's a whole completely different set of criterias, potentially. I'm not sure, and I'm looking to get your thoughts on this. What is the customer? What are their needs? How do you serve them? How do you get involved with that? Are you facing, what kind of challenges are you facing delivering services to the market? And I'll start with Mark on that side
Sure.
first.
So on the inside systems, we've kind of talked about that, but I think where you're alluding to is the externally facing products. And in Avery Dennison, we've always been a buy off the shelf and use it, maybe configure it, right? Or now SaaS. But externally facing, we've just started now in that journey of making our own products in IoT, in that platform around RFID. We're really big in RFID, so now we're making products to sell to consumers or to other enterprise customers. So my group has built a structure, a framework, what we call an App Security 2.0. We're trying to now instill a better level of practices around development skills and requirements for what has to be part of a development toolkit, because we've never had that skill before. So that's something new we're working on, creating security champions and code scanning and things of those natures. Those are things that some of you already have great practices around, and maybe you can share some of those with me. We're building, from ground up, but certainly that's where we're going and trying to learn from that and grow.
Yeah, but I would think that the stakes are higher in those
Oh, for
areas too,
sure.
right? So your budget, your enablement, and the diversity of potential solutions, innovations might come into there too, right?
Yeah, the good news is we're kind of invited to the playing field. They appreciate what we do for the enterprise, so they see value in that. They've kind of invited us to be part of that discussion. So that has been really great, and asking for budget is not as hard because everybody cares about security now. 5 years ago, when I asked for it, they'd say, what, you know? But now with all the events that have happened in the recent past, it's a lot easier to get money when you have a good use case
Right.
in business cases.
So Bentley, what's your entertainment business? Got a whole, well, I'll get to these guys who's dealing with prima donnas, but let's start over here. Sports, entertainment.
Some of our customers are prima donnas too. But it's tickets, so we're selling mostly directly to a consumer, and in some cases, the consumer cares, and more than before. But in most cases, they don't seem to care until someone tells them to care. And it's typically not the proprietor that's telling them to care. It's
You're saying
often-
caring about security
Yeah,
or
caring about
privacy.
security. So the customers don't pay for security, they expect it. They're not looking for it until it's not there. And so a lot of it is making sure that we can provide the service that we provide in a way that really protects their identity, so that not only does nothing happen to them, nothing happens to us from a regulatory issue or not. But really, customers aren't asking us for security. I don't think customers typically do ask for security in a consumer type environment. But with that said, I also don't think it's something that we necessarily can sell, right? We're not in that position to be able to say, hey, you know, buy tickets from us because we got good security, right? No, they care. Are you selling Taylor Swift or not? If you're not selling Taylor Swift, I don't care. I want Taylor Swift.
Right,
Right.
right. So it's interesting, when you just said something about the customer care and not care, and you have your own security requirements. Could the customer, and in the case of our agent here just sharing, could they be a threat? And how do you deliver security services to your customer, make that seamless and attractive, but at the same time, make sure that they're not?
Yeah, I don't want to overstate that. I mean, I think they do care when it's time to care, but they don't care when they're assuming that it's there. They're assuming that there's security there, right? So you have to be able to make sure.
Well, maybe
to do
I'll
that.
go a little more specific when we talk about identity, right? Customer identity proofing, right? Who is that person? And I would assume you guys are able to do identity proofing because you gotta have a credit card, right?
Yeah, and so it's important to us because, you know, if it's not a customer or the customer was duped, then we got to pay them back, right? So there's that piece of it. Are they a vector? Yes, they're a vector because they can use our systems. Well, they could also be a benefit because they may even be able to show us where there's a problem in the system, both from a customer service perspective and from a security perspective. So I see them as both kind of helping and challenging us, as well as showing us a way or becoming a vector of threats.
So Jeff, I'm gonna go to you now, and you know, we have Michael Keekly in the room, so he's probably very well aware of what you guys deal with, and you know, share with us how you take your talents and your front of the house service, and what are the security concerns? How do you embed that in there and deal with that community, right?
Yeah, so primarily creative artist agency, it's a people and relationships business, and we use technology to help support collaboration internally and improve the sales process, and collaborate externally with our buyers and clients and everyone who we have relationships with. There's a, you know, from the core part of the business, the traditional side of client representation, there's an implicit trust between the agency, the agent, and their clients, that they are going to keep anything that is shared with that agent protected, safe, confidential. So that's just expected. There's not kind of an extra, hey, we're going to pay more for the security of
And I
this
would
data,
assume,
kind of like.
and I would assume there's a lot of private stuff floating around.
Yeah, there's, I mean, from deal side of things,
Right.
the entertainment world is very much mixed between personal relationship and business relationship. It's not clear, there's not a clear line of distinction where that falls. So, yeah, there's a lot of information that's shared between friends. And our job, again, is really to understand and help protect the agency in where that information's collected, how it's used, how it's preserved by the individual agents. I think the other side that's become more of the challenge and is around, we're a client services business. So we will bend over backwards to make things happen for a client. And, with all the new privacy regulations coming into place, sometimes that's at odds. So that means as we're working with a new brand client, they want to communicate in certain ways. We have other platforms that are internal platforms that are enterprise supported capabilities, and we have to come to an understanding, whether it's a legal understanding on what the privacy means, privacy configurations mean for that, or whether it's a kind of the operational work of what we're doing. So, going through our GDPR process over the last 2 years, identifying these workflows have been hugely important to support those privacy elements and make sure the data is going where it's supposed to go. And again, to that comment about applying ownership to the data, the business now owns those workflows versus it's a tech issue. So
Well,
if they stray from those,
You and I talked about a particular event that you guys held, and you had to make some trade-offs. And this is where the balancing act, and you talk about user awareness earlier on the
Yeah.
corporate side, but in a commercial side or in a customer-facing side, you can also lean on the customers having to raise their level of awareness and security because there's a trade-off between which social network apps you use versus not, right? You want to share that?
Yeah, I think so. Working again with brand clients, there's first-party data that is either coming to us or we're creating first-party data. So in those workflows, you have to understand if it's being provided to us. Okay, we can use client systems for that. When we're collecting first-party data, we have to make sure that it's within our systems, within our workflow, that we respect the privacy obligations for that data. And as we continue to expand globally, we continue to see more friction amongst clients. So we have operations in mainland China, we have operations in the UK, we have operations across the EU, Switzerland, Germany, all have their own sets of challenges. So making sure that we're working directly with the business unit owners as they sign new clients, so we understand client expectations, we understand what those workflows are going to be, and can we support them on our systems going forward.
Great.
So it's been interesting. One of the things we had talked about in the conversation is we don't have a privacy office internally. It's formed between my team and the general counsel's office, and there's certainly back and forth on that side. The lawyers have very specific views on how the world works versus the business and technology workflows. But I think that's been kind of in digital transformation and privacy, getting to a common understanding of privacy. That's been the most important piece for us, is to have that really strong working relationship, general counsel, tech, business.
Great. So Ernie, you're in the same business really, right? And equally in the cloud, global, lots of different data. But you also have seen some of the incidents in this industry too, right? Any kind of, well, first of all, what is your view on customer-facing capabilities and how CISOs participate in that? And two, as an investigator, as a recovery, as a consultant to this, what are some of the lessons learned you can share with us?
Sure. If we, I think we'd all agree that technology and security should be enablers for the business, right? And if we talk about customers and internal customers who security serves, as our users, as our companies become more security aware, they might start to second guess things that are part of their business process in a good way, right? And now the maturity of security is to give them the confidence. So I would use the basic word of enablement, and then the next level would be confidence. Can we give users the confidence that when they're thinking about, well, wait a second, how do I share this client-sensitive data with outside parties? Maybe I shouldn't send it, maybe we can't get the deal done on time until I figure this out. Can we give them the confidence, and can we give them the tools to actually do that from a security perspective? And we're going to have to address that more and more as the users become more and more aware, and they're deputized, and they understand the value of the data that we all hold. And from a technical perspective, one of the things that Mark mentioned is the desktop. The desktop's not going away, and we still need to secure it. I completely agree with that, but I would say that the desktop or the laptop or the system, whatever we want to call it, is another data point. It's another factor in the user story. And what I'd like to see us do is use that data point as a tool. So if a user is on vacation and they drop their laptop in the pool, and now they're using their kid's laptop, and we can say, well, this user's logging in, they're logging in from Bermuda, from an IP we've never seen before, from a system that we've never seen before, but I think it's them, but maybe I'm not sure because the laptop doesn't have our suite of tools, they're just in a browser. Well, how about this? I'll let them view things, or I'll let them use the web app, but they can't download, or they can't forward, or they can't copy, right? Can we get to that point where we have that contextual understanding where, yes, the device still matters, but maybe it doesn't matter as much?
So let me just follow that on. Let's say, particularly in your side of the world, you probably get this more. Your talent may traverse multiple technologies, many of which are not under your control. So an agent, a talent may be communicating on Messenger, they may be communicating text message, Line, WeChat. WeChat's really big. How do you cast that net for something that is actually not visible potentially?
I don't know. It's a really fine line between privacy, between personal conversations, between personal devices. As Jeff mentioned, it's a relationship business, so it's a mix of life and work.
Right.
And how do we detangle that? I don't know.
Right. So maybe we've got another 15 minutes to go, and I'm on 10 minutes now. Okay, great. I want to time check. So the last bit here I want to move to is the engineering side, and really just to focus the discussion, security by design. Right? Security by design. We hear about that. That's the new motto for engineering today around cybersecurity. So I'm just going to go through and ask each of the speaker to kind of give us their thoughts on it. Real quick bit of definitional based on your organization, what you've adopted, and then we'll save the last 5 minutes for the community of questions. That's okay, guys?
Sure.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. I'll start off with Bentley. We'll go that way.
So security by design just means when at least to me, it means when if you're building a new system, when you're gathering requirements for what it's supposed to do, you're gathering security requirements, you're understanding what the data is, what you're going to be doing with it, and building those requirements in, and then as you go into design and architecture, you're building the security based on those security requirements, just like you're building the architecture based on the performance and functionality requirements, and then all the way through, you have security through each piece of that. So it's just part of the engineering. I think the challenge originally, and I'll say originally probably maybe 5 to 10 years ago, engineers weren't thinking from a security perspective, they're thinking from a performance and functionality perspective. And more, we still have a ways to go, but more and more they're considering security as they're designing it. So I think as an industry, we've come a long ways. We still have a long ways to go, but I think we're getting better.
Thank you.
That.
Jeff.
Yeah, so I agree with Bentley. And kind of our approach has been very much to establish the guardrails. So ensure that regardless of who's deploying the technology, because we have a wide variety of user communities that are deploying technology today because of the ease of rolling out SaaS platforms. So we have within all our core groups, from finance to general counsel office to HR, groups that kind of own and control their own technology stacks. What's important for us and critical for us is to establish the standards and the North Star policies that help enable those configurations, that they're able to build their guidelines, their guidance, their build docs from that. And then that also goes to our own internal app dev teams who are building applications into public cloud, making sure that we have agreement, again, on the architecture and standards for that. And if anything deviates from that, every so often, things hit the guardrails.
Right.
things, hopefully they don't go over, but they are going to touch on it, and we want to make sure we have the right controls and the right communication processes in place, that when it happens, we can be made aware of it, but that we don't have to be standing over every piece of technology that goes into production at all times.
Thank you. Ernie, what do you guys do there for security by design and DevSecOps?
Sure. Well, we're still on the maturity journey, but if I had to put a word on it, it would be automation. The more that we can automate and build those automated checkpoints into the development process, the more that people become accustomed to it, and it just becomes almost the tool becomes the bad guy, and that tool is maintained by security experts, so it's always up to date, ideally. And it's baked in. And then the other aspect is, hopefully there's the relationship there and the trust that security can be brought in early and won't muck it up.
Great, thank you. Mark?
Sure. So on the inside, looking at the office side of the fence, so we have a SDLC that runs through architecture and is forced, if you will. It brings in procurement, sourcing, security, infrastructure, all the different providers for a project, right? So we've been very blessed, if you will, now to have a process that everybody goes through, and we actually we have a catalog of all projects. So this is a level of maturity that's really grown over years. Before that wasn't there, right? You had your rogue IT groups all doing all kinds of crazy things, but that's really changed in the most recent years, and that's really great news. So my security things are embedded into the process and the checkpoints of what do you have to deliver on, and have you delivered on them before they go live.
Terrific, that's great. All right, I think we have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to use that and open it up to the audience here. Just again, as a summary, you've heard the infrastructure, the building of the platform for the enterprise, how we serve our customers in the market, as well as how we design security into our business. So with that, here, we've got a gentleman here, and then, Keith Lee first.
Thanks, Lance. We've mentioned obviously security and privacy and GDPR and the upcoming CCPA. And so I think privacy, certainly Facebook and a lot of the other big tech companies are getting a lot of that. And that bleeds over into security. And I believe I'm aware of 11 times that my data has been breached. Sadly, once by UCLA, twice by the federal government. And kind of touching on what Bentley said, trust. If in Jeff and Ernie's world, they had a public breach of their client's data, that would be an existential threat. I mean, that might actually crater the entire organization. And not all companies are that way. I still have to do business with the federal government, the Treasury, still I have to pay taxes, et cetera. But how do you view kind of privacy and data relative to security? Where does one start, one stop? Are they both really, I know they're intertwined. I'm just curious what the panel thinks about kind of those two things.
I'll take part of that. I look at privacy as just another business driver for security. So just like we need to protect our IP, or we need to protect, some people need to protect strategic plans, it's just another business driver for it. So now it's a different type of data, it's customer data, and now privacy is driving us to protect that. And I also, one other comment that I would have made earlier is that regarding customers, our customers wanting privacy, they're being told they want it because they're not really doing anything about it. And so the government's kind of stepping in to say, hey, look, you need to think about this, and they're forcing companies to do something about it with CCPA and GDPR. And I also think it's from my perspective, those things are actually kind of a good thing. I mean, on the one hand, I hate it because it's a little bit of a pain in the ass because frankly, you have a bunch of lawyers fighting it out. But it's just like SOX, right? SOX was a great thing from a security perspective. It helped us get a lot of things done, and we used it as an excuse to get some of these things done that we just weren't doing. So I think it really is helping businesses get better, ultimately providing better services, because I think it starts to uncover a lot of challenges you have, in this case, with data.
Yep.
I think what we're going to find, and what we're already finding is, well, we don't really know where all the data is, right? And now we're being forced to find out what it is. And when you do that, you actually can become more efficient with how you're managing the data. So I think there's a lot of other benefits.
Anyone else? Maybe another panelist, one more response?
I think it drives to the security and the controls that have to be put around that data. So again, identifying what the workflows are, what systems, who's handling data ownership, and then what are the right level of controls for that data. And when you get to that, there's a cost associated, and then it's like, well, do we do that? Do we even need to do that with that data anymore? Which has been super helpful from a security side, because if you don't have it, you don't need to secure it.
Did you want to respond to that, or you have a different question? Okay, well, you come on.
All right. So a couple part question here. First, be interested to know, there's a lot of mid-sized companies here. Security is important. Don't necessarily have a CISO, head of security in some instances. So first, who do you report to, and maybe a couple pros and cons to that? Kind of get understanding where organizations are going with that.
Might be a little sensitive for you.
No. I'm intentionally putting Ernie on the spot. And then the other one is, I probably get as many security vendors reaching out to me as phishing emails, and probably a combination of both. So how are you looking at, when we've looked at some things, sometimes it feels like we're potentially opening more holes than they're closing with open source that they're working on and so forth. So how are you doing that landscape and trying to find the right partners?
I'll answer the first part. I report to the best boss that anyone could ever ask for.
You're welcome for that softball question.
I think he's wrong. and my boss, they're all pros, no cons, and he's the CIO, and he's sitting right there.
My boss isn't here, but he's the CIO.
I report to the CIO as well, and really kind of appreciate being inside the tech organization. I think it really helps in accomplishing the work that my team has to get done today. And then having really good relationships with the general counsel office is important on that privacy side. Whereas when you start to move out of the tech organization, it becomes more policy and compliance. There's value on both sides. I've just seen kind of being embedded with the team has worked really well.
Typically, I've seen it typically work better that way, but I think it does depend on your organization and the culture, right? Because sometimes it does make sense, depending on the culture, to be somewhere else under general counsel.
But it differs industry to industry too.
Exactly.
So with that, maybe we'll go to.
How are you guys analyzing, figure out vendors, who to use, who not to use when we get dozens a day?
Well, one of the ways is meetings like this, where we can share and discuss experiences with vendors. That's where it's from peers.
In my experience is, and I'm kind of going through this now, is honestly, you have to know what you're doing and what you want to get done first, and then talk to vendors. And you have to vendors all got great ideas, and they're all good products, otherwise they just die, right? So you got to figure out what you really need, and that's a hard thing to do, though.
From a security point of view, there's a couple ways you can look at it. There's tools like Security Scorecard, BitSite, that look at the security of that company that wants to be a partner with you, or Cyber GRX, which is a network of companies like us that share each other's knowledge on that, kind of what you were talking about. So those are other ways you could do that.
Or a
And
consultant.
some of it depends on,
Can we move to the next question?
I'll just add real quickly, when you're picking a vendor, some may depend on how much time you have to devote to that. And if you have more time or you have a clearer idea of your goals, I would probably suggest working with a vendor who's earlier in their cycle, in their maturity. And that way you can help shape the product. They're more responsive to your requests. It can be shaped to exactly your needs. But if you don't have a lot of time, then get something more established and out of the box.
Here we go. One last question here.
So the contextual understanding piece you mentioned, how far are we away from the automated application of some of those tools in your enterprises, right? So that's for us, when you're in the public sector for enough time, you just assume that this is all happening out in the private sector and that it's all been figured out. So I would be interested to know, like from an insider threat perspective, right? Like we probably all have some good ideas about what are leading indicators of intellectual property leaving. I know that we do. That's how we find spies in our own organization, but we don't automate it, right? Yeah. So are we 1 year, 5 years?
I don't know about time frame, but we're not that far. One of the benefits of cloud, or several benefits of cloud, one is, again, each service is now an enforcement point and a sensor. And you not only know through your, hopefully, centralized identity platform who's going where, but then once they get inside, you know what they're touching. But on top of that, the other benefit of cloud is that prior to this, there was too much data. Even if we could log everything, it was too expensive to store, it was too expensive to search, it was too expensive to correlate. But I've seen one of the biggest changes of cloud is that now storage is cheap, compute is cheap, and those things that we dreamed about in terms of correlating and building that story, now we can actually do them.
I think you're going to see
it's
it
about
very
asking
soon.
the right question.
Yeah, I'd say 2 to 3 years will probably get mature enough, because there's two other factors, right? One is the data available in your enterprise that's workable? And two, what about the regulatory side of it? Now, do we have to be able to pull out a record about a person because they've chosen in their profile that says, remove me from all your records, right? So there's a lot of other pitfalls we have to deal with than just the technology.
Yeah, the cloud's allowing us to do things we couldn't do before,
Yeah.
and that is keep the data and then correlate that data in the cloud with other people's data, right? Without having to have access to that data, right? So you're getting the benefits of everyone else.
All right, so Andy's giving me the eye.
More than the eye.
I think,
Maybe
well,
the finger.
thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you very much, audience.
All right, one last piece of business before we break. We usually have a member minute where we identify the companies and the people who are here. So I'm going to quickly go through and call out the companies that have people here, and I would, if you would please quickly raise your hands when I mention the name of your company, so if people want to network, they can see you. So AEG Worldwide, App Dynamics, Avery Dennison, Belkin International, City of Los Angeles, City of Santa Monica, where to get myself on the list here, Commercial Programming Systems, County of Los Angeles, Creative Artists Agency, Epson America, Ernst & Young, Farmers Insurance, Fortinet, Google Cloud, Apogee, iSpace, LA Care Health Plan, LA Clippers, Lionsgate, Magenic Technologies, Mattel, Mobile Forming, Motion Picture Industry, Pension Health Plans, Paraveda Solutions, Pivotal, Slalom Consulting, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Southern California Edison, T5 Data Centers, United Talent Agency, and William O'Neill and Company. Okay, to make sure we have a good break, we will convene back shortly after 11 o'clock. So just listen for the bell at 15 minutes from now. Thank you very much.